Phillip is the one that I call when I get in trouble. He's the one that I call. I'm not crystal clear what Phillip's future holds, but I know it's going to be awesome. And here's what he says about himself. He's a man of humble beginnings. He's dedicated to fulfilling God's purpose for his life. His purpose is to know the heart of God and to make the heart of God known. He's been blessed to lead thousands of people through the process of transformation and he has experienced in his own life. I love that about Phillip. I met Phillip at Ted's restaurant here in Peachtree City. And in a span of about an hour, our hearts were permanently welded together. They weren't just joined together, they were welded together. The spiritual connection that he and I had in that brief encounter, has maintained itself to this day. He is one of my closest personal friends, as Carl Turner, is in my favorites list. Phillip's in my favorites list. He's married to the beautiful Darlena, and they have 4 children, the last of which is named Wilson, his only son. And he may or may not tell you how he got that name, but I want to turn the microphone over now to Mr. Phillip Field.
I think back about that first meeting with Jim, and I think to myself, it's rare when you meet somebody that you connect that deeply with them, but I saw something in Jim I don't see in everybody. I saw Jesus in his eyes. Have you ever seen Jesus in somebody's eyes before? And his passion for the Lord immediately resonated with me, and we were off to a great friendship. I ask you, Lord, this morning that as I share these words, that they would serve your purpose. Here's my story. In 1977, I was awakened in the middle of the night by a very loud sound in my bedroom. My father, who was drunk and raging angry, slammed open the door. Clutched in his fist was a double-barrel shotgun. He had a very crazy look in his eye. And he began to talk about the Grim Reaper. And as he marched into the other room in a crazed fit to find my brother, I realized I needed to act, and I needed to act quickly. So I reached for a pair of Levi's on the floor. For you millennials, that's a pair of jeans. I put the jeans on and I jumped from the 2-story window of our house. I knew that I was running for my life. What's interesting is about 2 months earlier, one of my buddies invited me to his little Baptist church about a mile from our house. And I can honestly say that I don't remember much about the sermon that morning, because all of that was foreign to me. I'd never been to church in my entire life, and nobody in my family had ever even talked about God. But when I was listening, something began to explode in my heart. Something began to release deep down inside of me. And I knew that there was something that was being presented to me that day that was very powerful. It felt warm, it felt real, and I now know that that was God's love. But in that moment, as most of us who've had that experience can remember, it's a very powerful, very life-transforming moment when you are introduced to the Creator of the universe. Isn't it amazing? And so in that moment, I had these forces, if you will, converging in my soul. I had all of this pain that was coming in as a result of the darkness that existed in my family. And that darkness wanted to control me, and it wanted to, if you will, produce this deep-seated lie within my soul. And that lie is that I was an orphan that nobody cared about. And the other force was a force of light. And what light was saying to me, and what truth was saying to me, and that loving voice was saying to me is that you're a son, and you're loved, and you matter. But you know, for a 12-year-old boy, that's a lot to comprehend. That's a lot to figure out. And so if you will, that convergence of forces and the wrestling that was going on deep inside of myself, that was a real struggle. I don't know how many of you grew up in a home like that, but it's a real struggle when the very thing that is being driven into you is competing with the very thing that you know opposite. And so there's this battle that goes on inside of us. My voice, my own voice was weak and passive. And if you will, I had this sort of lust for survival. I just wanted to make it out. I just wanted to get out of that situation. I just wanted to someday find some sort of freedom for myself. And deep in my heart, I knew that this love that had come in that little Baptist church, somehow that had to be my answer. Somehow that love would lead me to the place of freedom. You see, when you start to think about how God pursues us and how He comes to us and how He meets us, you know, oftentimes we talk about it happening in a church or in a sweet place. But you know, for me, where I needed God was in my bedroom at night when I heard the sounds of torment and violence and things going on in my home. I needed a real Jesus that would show up for me in those tender, scary moments. Can anybody else identify with that this morning? What's interesting is that it's almost as soon as I came to Christ, I developed this insatiable hunger for His Word. And so oftentimes, even on a Saturday, I would spend as much as 8 hours consuming the Bible. His Word fascinated me, and this pastor of this church, he was also fascinated with my hunger for the Lord, and he would give me books that I couldn't even read most of the words that were in them, and commentaries and things of that nature to go with the Bible. And I would ask him questions and why did God create evil? Which every pastor loves to answer that question, and he just loved to meet with me, and we would talk for hours about the Bible and things of that nature. I knew that He had a purpose for me, and I knew that He wanted to do something with my life. And so one day, this pastor said to me, he said, I really think that the next thing for you is that you just start preaching. So the next Sunday, he invited me to preach the sermon. Well, I'm not sure that he was happy about that after I preached my sermon. My sermon was entitled, "We're All Going to Hell." We had a long conversation after that sermon. But what happened is that, and this is often the case, is that we mistake a person's passion because of woundedness as a gifting in a place where they should take leadership. And so what really needed to take place inside of me was a deep healing. My pursuit of God's Word and all of those hours that I spent was a search. It was a search. I wanted to find, know, and experience that real love that would heal my soul. I was looking for God's touch down on the inside of me, and if it took 8 hours of studying the Bible, I would do it. It wasn't because I was trying to win some kind of an award or do something to get somebody's praise or something of that nature. It was a deep, long, hard search for the pain that I was carrying inside of me. But later on in my teenage years, I got a huge break. My Moses showed up. My deliverer came. I was a football player and a diligent student, and yet on the inside I was failing. I was falling apart. The stress that I was experiencing at home was affecting my entire life. And one day these two teachers, a football coach and a government teacher, they took me into a student lounge, a teacher's lounge, and in that lounge we began to talk about what was going on at home. And this other teacher, this is what I heard. She was probably trying to say something good, but when you're in pain Everything you hear is tainted by the pain. And she said something to the effect, and this is what I heard, she said, if you would be more submissive, you probably wouldn't have some of the problems that you have at home. I can see by the look on some of your faces that you had a similar reaction that I had. It triggered me. And that all that anger and all that shame and all that pain inside of me, I flipped the table over and I was out of that room, out of the school. I was done. I'm running away. This is over. I don't care anymore. And they chased me down in the parking lot and they said, hey, listen, we'll do everything we can to help you. Don't give up. And the next morning, my football coach came to me and he said, listen, there is a man in this community who has become interested in your story. He wants to meet with you after school and he may have a place for you to live. Well, at that point, I was willing to live at the local YMCA. It didn't matter where. I was willing to go anywhere but having to go back into the war zone that I lived in daily. And I'll never forget driving up in my coach's pickup truck up this long gravel driveway and this big white house that sat on the hill in Chester, Virginia. I didn't realize it, but that house would become my home for the next 10 years. And I stepped out of that truck and scared, didn't know what was ahead, and this tall, very sophisticated, kind gentleman stepped out of the back porch. James Wilson Crump. James Wilson Crump was both a retired principal of 25 years, same school that I'd been attending, and a World War II vet, lieutenant colonel. He had a knack for taking care of self-imposed orphans like me. And because of something that happened during the war and the things that he went through, he decided never to marry, but just to dedicate his life to helping young people. And so as I stepped into his house, he invited me in, my coach drove away, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are we in for now? He sat me down in the living room, and we just began to talk a little bit. And in those days, I was very quiet, very reserved, always never, or if you will, never trust in anybody, always trusted only me. That's what orphans do best. And I'm sitting there with this guy, and he begins to talk to me, and he said these words. He said, God has spoken to me, and he's told me to look after you. I want to give you a place to live. I want this to be your home. I want you to move here with me and finish your high school years, and we can talk about going to college. And so all of a sudden, this shift starts to take place inside of me, right? I mean, I've been living in the war zone where I'm going to, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to be lucky to see 18. And for the first time in my life, the love started to be real. It was real. It was real that I was going to get a chance to live outside of the oppression that I lived under daily. And he said, yes, I want you to stay here, and you can take my car, and you can go to your house, and you can meet with your parents, you can meet with you. And so I knew in my heart, my father, it wouldn't matter to him where I was, but I needed to face my mother, who was a praying, godly woman. And after the shedding of many tears, I said to her, I got to go. And she said, it's okay. You go. And I drove back to Mr. Crump's house. And I'll never forget how I packed, because I was thinking to myself, this is going to be a long journey. I might have to stay a while. So I grabbed my Letterman jacket, another pair of jeans, and 2 pairs of underwear. Long journey, right? teenager, right? And you know, it's amazing to me that during my time at staying at his house and how close we became and how real the experience was and the things that he taught me and the things that he empowered me to be able to do. You know, for the next 10 years, we had an amazing run together, if you will. He made a way for me to go to Oral Roberts University and then eventually on to Regent University. And all of those things were doors that he helped open for me. I mean, I got scholarships, and listen, I wasn't a great student, but he helped me get scholarships, and he found a way for me to get funding to go to school. And when I was finished with a master's degree, I walked away debt-free. Most of that was the result of his help with me. And you know, it amazes me how tangible and how real that love became for me. And at Regent University, I met my lovely bride-to-be, my wife, the love of my life, Darlena, and we decided to get married. And that decision to get married, the wedding was going to take place in Texas. And so I asked Wilson to be my best man. And so Wilson flew out to Texas, and we were preparing for the wedding, and we had this conversation over to the side. You know, we're just talking, visiting, and he looked at me and he said, "You know, Phillip, my purpose in life is complete." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "My purpose in life was to look after you and to help you get to where you needed to go." I put two and two together real fast, and I said, "Look, don't you dare think about leaving this planet. You got to stick around for a while." And he laughed. A couple days later, he got on a plane and went to Virginia. We moved back to Tulsa. And a few months went by, and I got a phone call. And on the end of that phone call was his sister, and his sister said, "He's in the hospital. If you want to see him, you need to come quickly." And so I did. I jumped on a plane and I flew out to Virginia, and I went to his bedside. This is going to take some water. You know, you have those moments, powerful moments, life-changing moments. This was one of the biggest in my life. I'm by his bedside. I'm all choked up with emotion. I'm trying to be strong for him. I'm trying to connect with him in this situation. I don't like the fact that he's sick. I don't like the fact that he's ready to graduate to heaven. And I knew inside of myself I needed to do something. Most of our lives together, he insisted that I call him Wilson, which was the name that all of his friends called him by. He would not allow me to call him Mr. Crump because that's what his students called him at the high school. And so I looked down at him and I said, "Can I call you Dad?" He said, "Yes, son. Yes, son. You call me Dad." And he said, "I want you to know that I love you, son. I love you, son." And I looked back down at him and I said, "I love you, Dad." You see, for most of my life up to that moment, I had never heard those words from my father. I was never privileged to be told that. That was never imparted to me. And a few days later, when he graduated and went to heaven, he left me the most precious, the richest, the most greatest treasure, the inheritance that every son needs, to know his father's love. He gave me something that is still inside of me today. That love from that exchange in that moment has fed me for nearly 30 years. Because every time in my life when I have ever gotten into a bad place, a difficult place, a challenging place, a place where I wasn't sure how I was going to make it through, I always go back to that place where I rehearse in my heart that I know I'm a son and that I'm loved. You see? Because it's that love that has transformed me, that has made me who I am. See, I needed real love. I didn't need a story about Jesus. See, a story about Jesus would not have healed that wounded heart inside of me. I needed the bloody Jesus that hangs on the cross, not the pasty white one in the portraits. I needed the one that took my pain and got bloody for my sake to heal those damaged areas inside of me that I carried as a man. I needed a real Jesus that knew how to really love me, and James Wilson Crump was that real Jesus to me. You see, when he would hug me, when he would hold me, when he would discipline me, when he would teach me, we would laugh together at the dinner table and he would tell jokes and stories from his past, I always felt one thing, and it didn't matter how he approached me, he did it with love. And so for 10 years, God undid what was done. And that love transformed my life and delivered me from my prison. And so as a result of that, I've dedicated myself to doing and being the exact same kind of person. Because my understanding is that if the love is given, then you get to give the love. And so what I have done with my life and my calling and the things that God has put in me is I've given the love back to many others. To my family first, to those who are broken, those who are needy, and even to the hard-hearted who think they don't need it. You know, what's interesting is that about 10 years ago, maybe a little more, you know how time gets, I went back to a high school class reunion. After 7 years of silence with my family, not being able to connect with my dad and my mother and my brothers, I go back and I want to meet with my family. I want to be with them. I'm hoping for reconciliation. I'm hoping for some kind of connection with them. And so sure enough, we got to spend some time with them, and the weekend went well. We had the reunion. It was a great time. And inside of me, there was this need to kind of have this deal clinching moment. You ever have that thing kind of pressing inside of you? And so in that moment, I said, Lord, I want to impart to my father the same love that was imparted to me. Give me a way to do it. Give me the words to do it. And so as we were getting ready to leave and we're getting in the car, these words just rose up outside of me. I looked at my dad, who had been a giant of a man all of my life. I looked at him and I said, Dad, I want you to know that I am proud to be your son. Tears started streaming down his face. And I said, Dad, I want you to know I love you. And out of the corner of his mouth, I heard it. I love you too, son. You see, when that love has been given to you, you can give it back. And you can give it back in ways that change what you might think is unchangeable. See, I know for a fact that the real love of the Father, the Heavenly Father, has been fully expressed for all of us through His Son, Jesus. Jesus is the demonstration of that love. And that love is worth everything. And that love has changed me, and it has changed my family. As a matter of fact, I just got off the phone with my dad yesterday, talking like families do, visiting like families do. I am turning over a new generation. I am not a statistic. I am not a wife abuser. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a son of the Most High God, my Father, and His love reigns in my life. I want you to know something this morning. Doesn't matter where you're from. Doesn't matter what you've been through. Doesn't matter how low or how high. That love is what we all need. And it's my prayer for you this morning that you discover what I know, and that that love too would reign in your life. As a matter of fact, if you don't know that love and you need to, you come see me. I'll introduce you to the one who gives it out freely. God bless you, and thank you for your time this morning.